Gallstaff. You have entered the dark of the nun. You are now by yourself, standing in a dark room. The pungent stench of mildew emanates from the wet dungeon walls. They're right next to you. I cast a spell. In the fridge, duh.
Hello, Matt.
Hi, Dungeon Master Rob. Hi, Gallstaff. Hi, all of our Dead Ale
Wives listeners. This is Dungeon Master of None, and we have a special episode of DM advice for you today.
Mm-hmm.
Matt,
how's your emanations off the wet dungeon walls? How's the pungent
I'm so
stench?
full of I'm emanated. It feels damp in here. How evocative was that description? Can't you just place yourself in a dungeon as Gallstaff the wizard?
Yes, I can, because today we're talking about describing things as a game master.
That's right. And before you panic, or don't panic, this isn't this isn't about how to be a great writer or how to string together texts of flowery descriptions of things. In fact, it's sort of the opposite of that, because as we will demonstrate here shortly, a common mistake made by writers and GMs alike is trying too hard to be elaborate and flowery. And the problem is that, the good thing and the bad thing is, as a GM, you will have to describe things. You are describing people, places, and things. And the good news is,
like Laura Ingalls Wilder, you are the eyes of your older sister, your older, more beautiful sister Mary, who has been stricken blind by scarlet fever.
That is a deep cut. I forgot all about the older sister. Yeah. But you have to show your players like what they're seeing, what they're smelling, hearing, feeling, right? And I think this is very intimidating to a lot of GMs, and rightfully so. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that hard, because you don't actually have to write elaborate descriptions. You just have to help your players understand what their characters are experiencing, and that is easier than you might think it is.
Yeah, this is like one of those like weird trick advice. I think is our big thesis. If you're about to turn the episode off, it's our advice is that the correct way is actually the easier way.
Yes.
Yeah, that's often not the case, but we both feel it is in this one.
In this case, it absolutely is, and we're gonna read and play some clips of various descriptions for you, many of which are bad, and when we get to the ones that I think are good, what I hope to demonstrate is that, like, even if you are at the top of your abilities, even if you are a fantastic writer and narrator, you might still be better off with a easier, simpler description of a person, a place, or a thing. It does depend a little bit on your group, but there's real diminishing returns on try-harding here, I guess, is the thing I want to communicate to you. I am a pretty good writer and a good narrator, and I do not stress myself about this. I do not write a bunch of elaborate descriptions. Here's one of my favorite examples. Things that you might do, like, again, make sure this works with your players. One time I had an NPC, and I was like, well, he looks like Dave Bautista in Blade Runner 2049, like the guy with the tiny glasses, except he's an ogre.
Yeah.
That was my description of that NPC, and my players loved that, and they never forgot what he looked like. That was way better than trying to write out a paragraph of what he looked like. I was like, yeah, just imagine that guy, and then there you go.
Excellent. That's a great shorthand, right? It's all about tapping into your imagination and connecting it to your player's imagination at the end of the day. Where do we want to start with this advice? Do we want to start with some bad examples, some general
let's
principles,
start with a couple
where we want to end
of
up?
bad examples, and then we'll jump into what's bad about them and what you should do instead. But Matt, will you read this first example from the famous fan fiction?
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Yeah, my friend Lodi Mary Smith smiled at me understatedly. She flipped her long, waist-length, gothic black hair and opened her crimson eyes like blood, that she was wearing contact lenses on. She had pale white skin, that she was wearing white makeup on. Hermione, sorry, I forgot it was Harry Potter fanfic. Hermione was kidnapped when she was born. Her real parents are vampires, and one of them is a witch. But Voldemort killed her mother, and her father committed suicide because he was depressed about it.
Way to get through that, Matt.
Thank you. Stop.
So this is, I included this as a joke because My Immortal is
It's
famously
funny.
bad, but it is sort of
Perhaps intentionally
perhaps
bad.
intentionally.
There's been debates.
The beautiful thing about this is nobody will ever know. No one will ever know if it was
Yeah.
this bad on purpose or not, and that's what makes
That makes it good
that's
art.
what makes it beautiful.
Yeah,
That's
I
exactly
think.
right. The thing about this, that if it was, true or intentional, is that one, it's very bad writing. So like that's a thing you should not do. Don't do it if it's bad. But also like it describes too much, it tells too much, and it doesn't really like communicate anything effectively, and then it also like takes a weird pivot into something else about her parents. If I were going to describe this person, like, again, here's a shortcut. You could just say she's a goth girl. Like, you could just like that would have been a better description than this one, is to just say my friend Bloody Mary Smith is a goth girl. And that for I think most people would be help them conjure an image in their minds that is more evocative than whatever this was.
I mean, the real takeaway here, and I've seen game masters do this, is don't get into backstory in your description, right? That should be part of a conversation or the players discovering a note or a clue. I think the other like more real problem for most game masters is pick a single descriptor adjective, right? The hair, it's not waist length and long,
Yes.
right? Pick one.
That's I have another really good example for this one, but yes, don't burden yourself or your players with like multiple descriptors for the same thing, especially not in the same sentence, and keep it simple. Our lesson here is always keep it simple. Less is more when it comes to descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all of the time. Matt makes a good point. Don't tell your players anything that like they wouldn't know from
Right.
Like if you see a person, you don't know what their backstory is. You don't know anything about their feelings or inner thoughts. You can just you know what they look like, how they stand. Maybe you know what they smell or what their voice sounds, or what they smell like, what their voice sounds like. I've mentioned this before. There used to be a bunch of hullabaloo if you were ever on like an early, well, it might still be happening. I don't know. I'm not in this world anymore, but like a role-playing MMO where you could like write out your character backstory in if somebody inspected you, and people would always get mad if you wrote in there, you feel or you see or because like that is telling the other player like what they're experiencing internally rather than just, describing like what they might experience from looking at the character. So lots of bad things going on here.
Now, if you want players to like find out someone's backstory or faction links, okay, you can describe, well, they're wearing a medallion with that fist symbol you saw before. Their eyes are glowing red. Their eyes are red. Do you want to ask them about that? That's a clue they're a vampire. Okay, cool.
And if you want to like draw this out of your players, you want to encourage them to look more, you can say something like, she's fiddling with her hands, or she's wringing her hands, or she's got a downcast look, or she's chewing on her lip, something to indicate that she's
a goth.
She's a goth, or she's nervous or withdrawn or something,
She's organizing her My Chemical Romance CDs.
Actually, again, this would be that's a really great description.
A stack of receipts from Hot Topic lines the cavern's walls.
The things that Matt's saying are like much better descriptors. They tell you a lot more about her. Yeah, she's got a Hot Topic tote bag. Yeah.
She is pinning a grr patch from Invader Zim to her pleated skirt as the flickering light of torches.
Matt and you and I are both
the cavern's walls.
longtime Zim lovers, and I really hate that it has become like a Hot Topic girly thing. It makes me.
It's been that for like 30
I know,
years,
Matt. It still makes me sad. It still makes me sad.
Okay. All right, on to the next
all right,
example.
here's a slightly less bad one. This is from Eldest. This is the sequel to Aragon by Christopher Perel.
So we moved from unpublished to published work.
Published. Saphira's muscled sides expanded and contracted as the great bellows of her lungs forced air through her scaled nostrils. Aragon thought of the raging inferno that she could now summon at will and send roaring out of her maw. It was an awesome sight when flames hot enough to melt metal rushed past her tongue and ivory teeth without harming them. So
Well.
this doesn't commit as many like horrible violations as the last one, but it is mostly just overwritten. And the thing is, you could indicate that Saphira is a powerful dragon in one sentence, without all of this stuff. It is sort of like bludgeoning you over the head with, yes, she is a dragon. She breathes fire. She's powerful. You don't need this. You don't need this much description, especially if you're going to do this kind of thing. You have to be a very, very good writer, and it has to be fun to read the description. It was not fun to read that description.
No, yeah, you can just in a single sentence, describe a dragon getting ready to breathe fire,
Yes.
right? At the end of the day, I think a lot of what we're asking is trust your players' imaginations,
Yes.
right?
I mean, that's the point that I'm often trying to make with these examples is that trust your players. They are going to hear this and they are going to form a picture in their minds regardless. So if you actually give them a little less, then that will actually make it easier for them. I am one of those people, Matt, surely you've seen this image, right? When they're like, picture an apple.
You've talked about this.
I've talked about this before. I have an idea of an apple, right? So this is actually something I think about a lot. I don't picture like a shiny apple unless I'm like trying to do it. I think about this a lot because I sometimes forget to describe things for my players because I have sort of like an image in my mind, but it's a very like abstract image. And so I am always sort of like forefronting to myself. I sometimes write down, be sure to describe X thing. But when I do that, again, Baron, try to keep in mind the way that my brain works. Leave a little room for interpretation because everybody is going to hear the same thing and sort of like picture something slightly different. And that's good because that engages them more than having everything meticulously described to them. Matt, I don't know about you. I personally, after a few sentences of being, having something precisely described, I lose track of what's happening unless I'm like literally like sketching it on a piece of paper.
The sin here is we used like 4 sentences to describe a dragon being powerful and breathing fire.
Right.
When half a sentence would be enough.
Exactly.
Well, it helps if your parents are
it does help if your parents are publishing
book
executives.
publishers. So we move from archive of our own, parents are publishing executives, to a thing that maybe was published without having nepotism.
Without having an editor, perhaps. This is from book 3 of this is from Oathbringer, which is book 3 of the Stormlight Archive by Brando Sando. I know that, some people like him, and this I am you know what? I'm going to own it. I'm a hater.
Yeah.
It's okay if you like him. I've read a bunch of his books. No judgment. But Matt, will you read this paragraph from I think the first or second chapter of the Stormlight Archive?
Okay. Adolin Colin strode over to a group of workers in crim-stained work outfits who were unloading boxes from the back of a wagon. Their chull twisted, trying to search out rock buds to munch on, fruitlessly. It's one sentence. Fruitlessly. They were deep within the tower, for all the fact that this cavern was as large as a small town.
Okay. So, listeners, I'm sure you can figure out the problems with this sentence. It's not particularly, or this paragraph, it's not particularly badly written. It does contain 3 undefined proper nouns. Now, I have read
Crim-stained,
Chol, rock buds. I have read the first 2 books of the Stormlight Archive. I am good at using context clues to figure out what things are. This is still pretty hard for me to parse. I I am not sure I know what's going on in this paragraph. And this is a very sorry.
This is a thing
Yeah.
that can happen to game masters. You have your own like set of nouns, right? And yeah, sure, that's fine to do, I think.
I think,
but
yeah, I really want to bring this up because it is a very easy trap to fall into with fantasy, especially, but science fiction and with game masters. Be aware that your players may not have context for everything. They may not have context for things that seem obvious to you, like gnome, or or even like paladin. Things, concepts that are fantasy concepts that are familiar to us. But like, you start throwing out proper nouns in too great a quantity, then it can get very confusing. And especially if you do have like a unique world, one that you've made yourself, or it's something like Numenera, or it's Eberron or something. Be careful when you start just like chucking around terms, because it can get overwhelming if they are not being foregrounded or explained.
Yeah. I think of that classic tweet, who I can't remember who it's from, that's like, if your fantasy book starts calling bread like field fruit, maybe you've gone too far.
There's a famous blog post from like 20 years ago. It's like, just call a dog, right? Like, don't call a dog a florp or something like that. And this is very important advice. Do not get too clever with your fantasy like naming conventions. Bread is bread, dogs are dogs, swords are swords. You can have things that are different, but people have to be able to read and understand the thing that you are.
They have to understand your description, right?
Yeah.
And then, when you're saying your description, instead of they were deep within the tower, for all the fact that this cavern was as large as a small town, right? Instead of being clever, right? Just tell your players the size of the room.
Yes. That this is also like a really good point, and I think I suggested this at the beginning, but like, don't get clever. I'm sorry. Tabletop games are not the place for you to be clever. If you are a good writer and you're writing a novel, you can be clever. This is not the place for it. Your players are hearing this information from your mouth in real time, and they're going to have to parse it. You can have interesting descriptions. You can say things that are funny or interesting, but don't hide the ball. Just tell them what they're seeing. Let's talk about
move from the land of the novel to published adventures, right? The dreaded boxed text.
So this is really what it's all about, and I'm
I like saying boxed text. Like Tim Heidecker says, ridged chips.
Ridged chips. So this is long, but please bear with us, listeners, because I think it's like very important to understand why we're having this conversation. And this is from Keep on the Borderlands, the OG. By Gary Gygax.
Right, which I'm sure we'll get again.
We are getting it again. I am very curious to see
revised.
if they will rewrite this section or if they will just copy it in its entirety. This is from, I think, midway through the module when the players are headed to a new zone. The forest you have been passing through has been getting more dense, tangled, and gloomier than before. The thick, twisted tree trunks, unnaturally misshapen limbs, writhing roots, clutching and grasping thorns and briars all seem to warn and ward you off, but you have forced and hacked your way through regardless. Now, the strange growth has suddenly ended. You have stepped out of the thicket into a ravine-like area. The walls rise rather steeply to either side to a height of either 100 feet or so. A height of about 100 feet or so, dark, streaked rock mingled with earth. Clumps of trees grow here and there, both on the floor of the ravine and up the sloping walls of the canyon. The opening you stand in is about 200 feet wide. The ravine runs at least 400 feet west, actually 440 feet, to where the western end rises in a steep slope. Here and there, at varying heights on all sides of the ravine, you can see the black mouths of cave-like openings in the rock walls. The sunlight is dim, the air dank. There is an oppressive feeling here, as if something evil is watching and waiting to pounce upon you. There are bare, dead trees here and there, and upon one a vulture perches and gazes hungrily at you. A flock of ravens rises croaking from the ground, the beat of their wings and their cries magnified by the terrain to sound loud and horrible. Amongst the litter of rubble, boulders, and dead wood scattered about on the ravine floor, you can see bits of gleaming ivory and white. Closer inspection reveals that these are the bones and skulls of men, animals, and other things. You know that you have certainly discovered the Caves of Chaos.
Dun, dun,
Dun,
dun.
dun, dun.
Now,
Ooh.
I think this is a great example, Rob, because, right, often we have to describe things that aren't just like, hey, here's one room, one object, one person or monster. It's like, hey, we often present our players with, there's a lot going on here,
Right.
This is like the Caves of Chaos are one of those things, right? You've got a big canyon. It's important for the players to understand there's a big canyon with multiple entrances, and there's certainly a vibe you want to describe.
It's like an establishing shot in like a film, right? You're trying to set the scene, right? You have to communicate not just like one thing, but like a whole setting, like a basically
Right.
like where the scene will take place. And this is challenging, admittedly.
But the problem is, right, the description as written, took 2 minutes for Rob to read. It was just 2 minutes of your players essentially not getting to play the game.
Yes.
And
they
just have to listen.
I would say like maximum any single description should take 30 seconds. And maybe that's too long, but like I would time yourself. If it takes longer than that, you're in trouble. And the issue is, right, that you need to communicate all this information, but you need to do it quickly and effectively enough so that your players aren't lost. But there are ways to do this, and it does depend on like what you're focusing on, right? So, for example, each one of these sentences contains multiple adjectives or adverbs about the same thing, right? You don't need to describe both twisted tree trunks, unnaturally misshapen limbs, writhing roots, clutching and grasping thorns, right? One of those is fine. You also, here's a thing, this is maybe like a cheat, but, in this is a description of like exactly how high the walls are and how deep the ravine is. I would leave that out. If the players ask, then tell them precisely how tall it is, but don't include that information in your like establishing description. Like have that be something if the players are like, how tall is it? Tell them, but like don't immediately describe precisely how many feet tall it is.
For me, that's something I usually don't cut, in that I just want the, because like adjectives like large or small can mean so many different things.
Yeah.
And if I actually know in my like notes how big something is, I'll give the exact numbers, right? You crawl out of the twisted forest into, a canyon. It's about 400 feet long and 100 feet deep. And you can see some like bones in the bottom. There's a couple twisted trees growing on the side, and the only signs of life are like some birds.
I do agree. I tend to prefer to leave it for the players to ask, unless it's something like a wall where they're going to know exactly how tall the wall is. But Matt's right. Maybe leave that in. You have limited time. The other thing that this reminds me of, or that I was reminded of, is instead of saying something like cave-like openings, just say caves. This is basic writing advice. The thing is, you can communicate all this information and in like half the time by just like cutting out a bunch of stuff. This is a really good example of something that is just aggressively overwritten and just packed with unnecessary description. Let me read. Sorry, I've rewritten this. Sorry, I've revised this. I have not added anything. I have not rewritten or improved the language. I have rewritten this section just by cutting words. So It's still not good.
It's like pull out your pencil for underlining, or your highlighter is one method.
Yes,
for sure.
So here's a much shorter version. The forest you've been passing through has been getting more dense, and the twisted tree trunks, grasping thorns and briars all seem to warn you off, but you have forced and hacked your way through regardless. You step out of the thicket into a ravine. The walls rise rather steeply to either side. Clumps of trees grow here and there, both on the floor of the ravine and up the sloping walls of the canyon. You can see the black mouths of caves in the rock walls. There is an oppressive feeling here. Upon a dead tree, a vulture perches and gazes hungrily at you. A flock of ravens rises croaking from the ground, and amongst the litter on the ravine floor, you can see the bits of gleaming ivory and white. Closer inspection reveals that these are the bones of skulls of men, animals, and other things. You know that you have certainly arrived at the Caves of Chaos.
Yeah. Nice. And I think you can like iterate this,
Yes.
right? If you can continue to say, okay, what is the all right
You could, it
thing?
could be even
let's
shorter.
get this down to 2 sentences, 1 sentence. You can
Yes.
continue to do this when a module or an adventure or your own prep presents you with too much information.
Yes. And this is my advice, by the way. Yeah, like Matt said, if you are doing a published module and it's too long, my advice, if it's something you're comfortable marking up or you want to write it aside separately, is just take a pen, highlighter, and just cross out the stuff you don't want to say. That's the easiest method. That does not require you to be a good writer. It just asks you to take a look at things you don't want to say. And there are harder versions, right? You can rewrite this stuff. I have rewritten descriptions to be shorter and better, but you can just cut. You can also cut whole chunks of text. If there's boxed text you don't want to read, don't read it. No, that they can't make you.
Did you want to look at this example from a more recent?
Yes. Will you read this one,
module?
because it's actually
Yeah.
it's actually different, and I do sort of like want to talk about this one.
The wall around Evernight's graveyard is riddled with gaps, and the ground near it is covered in fallen rubble. So leaving the graveyard is easy. Directly east of the graveyard, a large market stretches for blocks in every direction. Tattered canvas and shrouds separate the numerous stalls. Feeble moonlight and flickering torches illuminate the city, regardless of the time of day.
So, Matt, this is from Vecna, Eve of Ruin. My
Yes.
problem with this one is that it doesn't tell me anything. Like, I don't have anything to work with. There's a graveyard. There's gaps in the walls.
Yeah.
There's a
You can get through
market.
it. So there's no challenge for the players to get through.
There's a
right?
market, but like,
There's no which part of the market
Yeah.
you want to go to. Well, it's all the same. So
it's moonlight, and there are torches. What kind of torches? What quality? I mean, I hate to like contradict myself, but this is an area where more description would have been good, or better description, given the space that we have. But like the problem here is that I am not getting much of an image of Evernight's graveyard, and I have and its market. I have very little to work with here.
yeah, I think right descriptions. It's got to do 2 things. It's got to like give some sort of feeling or idea that you might want to convey to the players, and I think this is trying to do that. But it's also got to give them information on what to look at next, right? And here, right, if the market extends in every direction, right, and it's all the same, what do you want to do, right? At least with the Caves of Chaos description, we have the idea that there's multiple entrances, so maybe we'll want to find out which one is more interesting, easier to get to. We know there's a cave with things on the bottom. Do we want to climb the walls of the canyon or go
Right.
down the cave?
Do you want to look
or
at the
go
bones?
down the middle
There's
of it?
things.
Like,
There's things to do.
there are choices to be made. Yeah.
So
This is like, well, I guess we leave the graveyard because it's easy. But we go to the market, but there's nothing. The problem is this one's written where you go to the market and no matter what you do, a potted encounter happens. So there's no choices to be made.
Yeah. So this is the opposite problem. And the real, I guess, sin here is if there's nothing to say, just don't bother. Like the problem is not that this is particularly badly written compared to some of the others. It's just that it's a waste of a paragraph because it doesn't really communicate anything to the players. It gives them no choices. It provides no like information. And this sort of like brings me to like one of our big picture general principles. And that's really that you're trying to communicate vibes or feelings, right? You're trying to evoke something in your players. And there's good ways and bad ways to do that. Like for all of its clumsiness, that description about the Caves of Chaos is trying to be spooky and creepy and create a sense of foreboding doom. The problem is that if you spend 2 minutes describing something, it's not a good way to provoke a sense of impending doom. But a good description will provide information while also creating a sensation. And here's a like a little bit of a better example of this from, a few years down the line. Gygax has improved as a writer, and this is from the Temple of Elemental Evil. Your party is now approaching the village of Hamlet, having ridden up from the lands of the Wild Coast. You are poorly mounted, badly equipped, and have no large sums of cash. In fact, all you have is what you wear and what you ride, plus the few coins that are hidden in purses and pockets. What you do possess in quantity, though, is daring and desire to become wealthy and famous. Thus your group comes to Hamlet to learn. Is this indeed a place for adventurers to seek their fortunes? You all hope, of course, to gain riches and make names for yourselves. The outcome of this is uncertain, but your skill and daring, along with a good measure of luck, will be the main ingredients of what follows, be it for weal or woe. The dusty, rutted road is lined with closely grown hedges of brambles and shrubs. Here and there it cuts through a copse or crosses a rivulet. To either hand, a forest and meadow have given way to field and orchard. A small herd of kine graze nearby, and a distant hill is dotted with the wan stone chimneys with thin plumes of blue smoke rising from them. A road angles west into the hill country, and to either side of the road ahead are barns and buildings. Hamlet at last.
Yeah. This is like at the beginning of an adventure,
yeah.
Right? So, you could afford yourself a little bit of a longer description. But if we get over the hey, introduction to playing D&D first paragraph into, the dusty, rutted road, we've in 4 sentences described a village, right? It could be less, but hey, I have an idea. This is a small village. There are orchards and fields nearby. There's a main square of town where there's 2 roads coming together. Perfect.
Yeah.
Maybe we go there.
That was a little long, and I read the intro paragraph because I liked it because it set the scene.
It's a great intro paragraph.
It sets the scene, and it provides that feeling, and then it leads very naturally into a brief, again, not a particularly thrilling description in my opinion, but I know what Hamlet looks like. I know what its surrounding environs look like. I know what kind of vibe there is at the village, and it took 2 or 3 sentences to do that. There's obviously a lot more information about Hamlet to be learned, but your players will immediately know sort of what they're experiencing and have something to do. And this is just substantially better than all the other things that we read.
All right, do we want to look at some examples that we consider slightly good?
That are good, yes. Let's read one from one of our favorite recent modules. Just a short bit.
Just another gruesome day in the 10 towns. Howling wind, bitter cold, foul tempers, and snowdrifts big enough to bury a herd of moose. But today the local tavern is abuzz with news about a series of recent killings. Before the murders, the only question on everyone's mind was, will Summer ever return to Icewind Dale? Now the question is, will I be the killer's next victim? Nothing breeds fear and paranoia like a murderer with no face. Now,
this I consider to be actually good writing. This is well written. This is an introductory paragraph like the one we just read from Hamlet. So it's light on.
You're starting an adventure or a scene or a session.
It's light on detail, right? You will still need to probably describe a tavern or a little bit about 10 towns. But to me, I am already more interested and engaged and ready to start playing from this short paragraph than anything that we have read, right? I know that 10 Towns is cold. I know that it's kind of violent. I know that it's got a bunch of chatty people in it and that there's a killer on the loose. That is all I need to start playing,
Right. And it's great in that we've established, hey, you already know that people in the town are talking about the murderers, right? This is assuming, right, the players are in the town, they've been chatting with people they know, right, or overhearing conversations. We can set that aside so that now they know I want to go talk to this specific person to see if they have any theories or ideas or something like that. So you can make your, intro scene description do more than just the senses of the players.
Yes. And this is sort of what I mean by vibes. Is you're trying to not just tell the players in strictly, precise terms exactly what they're seeing, exactly what they're hearing, but give a sense of like what the adventure is. This is what the intro to Hamlet does, or to a Temple of Elemental Evil does really well. You're a bunch of impoverished wannabe adventurers, and you're looking to make your fortune. Rime of the Frost Maiden tells you that like there's some mystery afoot, eternal winter. You're here to solve people's problems and, you know, bring peace and order back to Icewind Dale. Like these are great because they paint a much fuller picture than just like what exactly is there. To my mind, your players can picture a tavern, right? Like, you know, maybe you want to like describe the way that the tavern is interesting or different, or like, well, who's specifically in it. But like what they will need more help with, or what is more useful for you to do as a GM, is be like, this is what's going on in terms of the big picture, in terms of your relation to the surroundings. Like, what is the feeling? What is the tension in the scene?
Yeah. The people in the town are full of fear and paranoia. Perfect. We got that from the description. That will set the stage for all the conversation that follows. What's another good example?
So I didn't want to I didn't want to go grab, I don't know, a like Hemingway book or anything. So I literally like whatever I had like literally on my shelves here, I grabbed just some better examples. So I've got one from The Lions of Al Rassan by a guy, Gabriel Kay, one of my favorite books. A good book, very well written, but like not, you know, this isn't high literature necessarily, but this is a description of a person and a place. Just past sunrise, Jehane was in the booth by the fountain that had been her father's before her, in time to see the last of the farmers coming in from the countryside with their produce-laden mules. In white linen robes beneath the physician's green and white awning, she settled in, cross-legged on her cushion, for a morning of seeing patients. So contrast this with the creme-stained workers in the cavern the size of a small town, right? They are the same, roughly the same length, and like doing the same thing, right? They are establishing a scene or a moment. This tells us 1,000 more things than the one from Brando Sando, right? We know
colors. There's
colors.
Colors are so important, right? Brando Sando didn't give us any colors.
Is creme a color?
I don't think so.
Again, in just like a couple words, we know what Jehane is wearing. We know what her job is. We know what's happening around her. You know, we don't know a lot about like the fountain. Again, this is two sentences, and it communicates a lot about both the person and the setting. This is what I feel like you ought to aim for when describing a place or a person. You know, you can in a few words be like, this is what they're wearing, this is what they do. You can describe it directly, or you can sort of go at it, you know, a little bit obliquely like Kay does here. But this is not like super sophisticated. What I really want to, I mean, I think it's good, but like I don't want to. The point is not like you should be a fantastic writer, but like look how few words it takes to tell us what we need to know about this character.
I think it also adheres to the 2-sentence rule. Yes. You get 2 sentences. Okay, do we have another good example of description?
Let's I got a fun one from one of my from Pillars of Eternity, from one of my favorite games. Now, I want to give a little bit of a caveat here. This is a bit overwritten, but if we are talking about good character descriptions, this is a good one. This is not something you should aspire for, but it is, you know, if we're going to waste time on words, this is what they should sound like.
An aged dwarf shares this strange floating platform with you. His face is creased by so many wrinkles that his features lie buried amid shadowy pockets of skin. Still, the dwarf's well-practiced habits have left telltale tracks of a welcoming rictus across his visage.
Okay, yeah. I like this if you want to describe an old dwarf that is likes to smile. There we go.
It's too much. I would use one of those sentences if I were something like you. But again, this is both a good and a bad example, because this is more than you should ever try to do in your games. Right. But can you not picture an old dwarf, right? Like it's telling you a lot about like what the character in front of you is seeing.
Yeah, no, I like this. I like this. Maybe you don't have to use so many $10 words,
You
right?
do not.
You can use
You do not.
practice smile instead of
Yes.
rictus.
Yes.
But
I mean, notoriously,
absolutely.
these games, they've got Chris Avallone and Josh Sawyer and some of the most overrighty writers in game writing, but
which we love in our video games.
which I love. It is good. I think the point that I want to make with this one, and the one that I'm going to play here in a second, is that if you are going to bother, going this hard, you still only want a couple of sentences, and it's still like maybe not like the best use of your time, but it's there if you're going to try for it. Okay, here's a really
let's spin us another track.
Here's
DJ.
a really good one. And one thing that we haven't mentioned is that a good way to help you and your players is to use all 5 of your senses. Make sure you describe what they're seeing, but also what they're hearing, maybe what they're smelling, what they're feeling physically, like if it's hot or it's cold. If there's something they're tasting, describe it to them. This is good also, like if there's something you're better at describing than other things. Like some people are really good at describing sounds. Some people are really good at describing what things look like. As we've discussed, I'm not as good at describing what things look like as I am certain other senses, and so I lean on others.
Rob's really good at describing his sense of balance, his inner ear.
I am.
It's great.
All right, this one's from Disco Elysium. It's I'll play it for you.
Yes? The lieutenant's posture becomes rigid and uncomfortable as you lean forward and sniff the area just above his shoulder blade. The lieutenant is fastidious as a cat in matters of his personal upkeep. And yet, in the folds of his jacket, you can just perceive the stale and acrid traces of oil rags, transmission fluid, and brake pads. Wait. There's something else there. Something that sets your GABA receptors aflutter. The lieutenant's aftershave, a common drugstore brand. Strong hints of pine needle. But what sort of ideological picture do these smells paint? Tough to say.
Okay.
It is tough to say.
It's tough to say. What does it tell you?
What is the ideology of the smells?
I like this one, obviously, because it's hilarious. But also, again, I don't know that you should try to do this, but I think it is a good way to demonstrate that describing how somebody smells can tell you as much about them as what they look like. Like, we don't need to see that Kim is like a grease monkey, that he's got like wrenches in his car, or that he's got a souped up ride. You know that from catching a whiff of engine oil, right? And maybe the like faint aftershave suggests something about his fastidiousness, right? Like that was described in the first sentence. This is less overwritten than the Pillars of Eternity one. Again, it's still a little bit much, but lean on. This is also good because like it to me, again, after reading and listening to tons of descriptions of people, having somebody's smell described in such lurid detail, like it sticks it in my mind, right? It reminds me of something. So if you have a character that you're trying to say something about to your players, describe the perfume they're wearing, describe the cologne, or that they smell like brimstone or something. This can do a lot.
Right. I mean, this is beyond the like actual words we choose to convey this to our players. This is a good rule that separates good descriptions from bad descriptions, right? If we think back to My Immortal, we're only ever described one thing, that this person is a goth. For Agent Kim or the dwarf in Pillars of Eternity, right, we describe two things, right? Old and likes to has some smile, but
right.
Some smile lines, right? Smells like auto repair or like transmission fluid and drugstore aftershave.
Right. Well, that tells us, that Kim is enthusiastic about car repair, about auto maintenance, but not particularly concerned with impressing anybody with his aftershave. Like it's a rich description, a rich text even, Matt.
rich text. Should we? Do we have time for
Yeah,
another
we
example?
got
or
one,
should
one
we,
more
okay,
example,
let's
just
go.
a sort of like a big picture one. Again, just grabbed from what was on my shelf. This is from Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clark.
Chief among Mr. Segundus's supporters was a gentleman called Honeyfoot, a pleasant, friendly sort of man of 55 with a red face and gray hair. As the exchanges became more bitter and Dr. Fox Castle grew in sarcasm towards Mr. Segundus, Mr. Honeyfoot turned to him several times and whispered such comfort as, "Do you mind them, sir? I'm entirely of your opinion. And you are quite right, sir. Do not let them sway you. And you have hit it upon the head. Indeed you have, sir."
This, I think, is great, right? We have just a couple of things about Honeyfoot. He's 55, red face, gray hair, but just these couple sentences about how he responds to Mr. Segundus and this conversation tells us all sorts of things about his character and his relationship to the other people in the scene, and to me paints a much richer picture than that of Bloody Mary Smith, even though there were more words spent on her appearance.
So this is such a great thing for people, right?
Yes.
Is once you have like any descriptives that you've wanted prepped out, for me, instead of putting my effort into writing, fancy descriptions of what someone looks or smells like, to me, little short phrases of how that person talks, right? I think this is a common problem.
Yes.
For most people when describing and interacting with NPCs is that they all speak with the same voice, right? It's your voice. And to some extent, that is unavoidable, but you can make it better through your prep by giving them like ways of talking, and you can look over their sort of stock phrases and are like, well, does this aristocrat sound the same as this monster, sound the same as this vampire, sound the same as this mechanic? If they all sound the same, well, your players are going to treat them all the same.
Right. This is, I think, advanced advice, and this is, I agree with Matt 100% here. A thing that you can do, that you can lean into. This is another area where you need to know your strengths. Again, I think I'm a little bit better at writing dialogue than I am at certain descriptions. So I will write down stock phrases. I will be like, here's the opening sentence, or here's like the last two sentences of an exchange between these two characters, to make sure that I get the voices right, that they are not like the actual voice I'm using, but like how they speak. Because Matt's right. If you're not careful, all of your characters will sound the same. And this is a problem that all GMs of all stripes and experience levels run into, because it is your voice, and often you are doing this just off the cuff. This is this is advanced, but something that can help with your prep is writing down notes about how a person talks, and even like little snippets of things they might say, so that you can sort of prompt yourself to make sure that your aristocrat and your Cockney guard don't sound the same or don't speak the same way.
Here's my next big tip is just you don't even have to do this, right? Rob, let's imagine our players are entering, the entrance to the Valley of the Caves of Chaos. And we know the vibe, right? We want the vibe to be foreboding, right? This is a dangerous place. Instead of describing this, you can say you enter, the valley, there's caves all around. What do you see that tells you that this is a foreboding and dangerous place? Player might say, well, I don't know, there's a gloomy sky above. Okay, great, there is. Another might say there's, a bunch of scavenger animals picking some carcass clean. Perfect. And, if they say something that you're like, that's not actually there, you just sort of modify it. And then you're having a conversation with your players, and you've brought them in collaboratively to describing it, right? Players like doing the describing, right?
They do. And you could do this with people too, right? Like you prompt them. You say, you see a well-heeled aristocrat before you. He's, the cousin of the king. What do you notice about him? And they'll say something like he's got a fine mustache, or he's wearing a fancy suit.
To give them direction, right? Instead of just saying, what do you notice about him? What do you notice about him that tells you that he is a haughty aristocrat? What do you notice about him that tells you would rather be somewhere else than here?
Yeah. You can do this with, like Matt said, you can do this with locations, you can do it with people and things. You have to prompt your players, and this is, I think, a little bit more advanced, and you have to trust them, and they have to be engaged. But I think that this is important, especially if you are somebody who struggles with descriptions or finds yourself, not enjoying this part of prep as much, is bring your players in, because you can describe in very broad terms, like Matt said, this is a gloomy ravine. They can fill in the detail, and that's just as good as you writing it yourself, and it engages them. Obviously, your group has to want to do this, but I think most of them do, and it's fun for them, especially if they're beginners and starting to sort of grow into their role playing a bit, to sort of try to think about what are they seeing, what are they experiencing, what are they feeling.
Yeah, I think this gets to a larger point, and since Rob and I are going to Gen Con, or will already be at Gen Con when this episode releases, I was looking through the archives of the Wizards of the Coast website, which you can only find through the Wayback Machine, but they used to have a blog called Design and Development, and this is from 2005's Gen Con by Jesse Decker and Dave Noonan, titled Undercover at Gen Con. And they talk about a lot of things they observed at Gen Con as Wizards employees. The first one is Undercover Insight number 1, box text equals MIGO. MIGO is an acronym for My Eyes Glazed Over. And what they found was that when GMs running Wizards of the Modules started reading box text, players started checking out and would immediately ask about things that were already described by the box text, because it's just boring to listen to someone read a paragraph from a book.
Yeah. And this is actually like a really fascinating article too, because it reinforces all the things that we have been talking about. One of the things that the authors mention is, among the questions I heard from players who had supposedly been paying attention: why is the floor slippery? What color is the dragon again? There's a big lever on the wall. Wait, the lady in the room is a corpse? Who's Karthos? Is that the guy we were fighting? If you were like us, these are questions you have heard, or similar questions you have heard from your players.
Yes.
And there's no way, by the way, there's no way to avoid your players asking you questions about things you have already described. You just have to learn to be patient. But you will save yourself and them and everyone a lot of misery by not including that information in a big, boring, boxed text. Help yourself out here.
Jesse and David write, if you're the DM, you get 2 sentences, period. Beyond that, your players are stacking dice, talking to each other, or staring into space. And I think more broadly, they write, box text replaces conversation with oration.
Mm-hmm.
I think my goal, right, and my advice here is more conversation, right, less oration. Right.
Yes.
And how do you move to that? And it's to make sure that you still have to make the first move, which is like, what about this very old dwarf tells you he's super kindly? Or what about, you could start with something like that, or you enter, the mining operation full of workers and beasts of burden, right? But you want to, even if you still have to make the first move, you want to make that first move as quickly as possible, so that your players can ask you questions or do things.
And I really do want to encourage you to take shortcuts and make this simple for yourself, right? I'm running a lot of Mothership these days. I do a lot of things like, okay, you enter a room, it looks like engineering on the Enterprise. There's, some lockers on the wall with that have been burst open by something, and then there's a corpse in the corner. What do you guys want to look at? And then they will tell me what they're interested in, and then I will do more descriptions. But I am not describing a bank of view screens or a bunch of levers. I'm just this is what you see, and go from there. If it's an important room or something very specific, then I'll have a 2-sentence description that I will write out because it's significant. But then I will still do the same thing and be like, what are you looking at? What do you want to know more about? how do you engage with what I've just described to you?
Right. And if our big advice is to stop describing and start conversing, where do those like descriptions and interesting images in your mind still go? You can still have them, right? Players like, well, I'm pulling out my scanner and walking over the corpse, and then you say, well, it's you can still see it's faintly smoldering and weird energy is arcing off the charred skin. What do you want to do, right? You've got that like fun stuff, but instead of having to write a paragraph, which is so much work, right? Put that into, like, for me, descriptions of places in my own notes are always just bullet points, right? Corpse, weird energy on skin, charred, burnt, etc.
Yeah, this is great advice, because I do like to describe, weird things and fun stuff, but it's so much more fun for me and for the players if it's part of their investigation or interaction with the world. Like, I would rather tell them about the weird DNA signature on the plant sample inside the specimen box after they have discovered it and been like, oh, I use my bioscanner on the specimen box, and then I can tell them, instead of just, making that part of my big chunky description.
For me, my other big picture, like what I do is, okay, so I've got my list of bullet points, and they're usually nouns with an optional 1 or 2 modifiers, thinking, what are those modifiers like? What information are they conveying, right? And sometimes if I can't think of the modifier, I'll write down the information, kindly NPC, and then hopefully during the time I can think of what way to describe it. And for me, I try and imagine what my players are seeing and then extemporaneously share that imagination, which I think there's something in our like modern human brains where we're more engaged when someone is trying to have a conversation with us, and if we're doing it extemporaneously, it's more engaging than if we've prepared something.
I think that for most people, it feels more natural. It feels more real, and that makes it more tangible, easier to hold on to, more interesting than just having something orated at you.
Right. And how do you organize these like descriptions? And for me, it goes, I try and after I usually do this in a word processing thing where you can move things around, is I try and reorganize all the stuff and interesting things that people can hear, see, and smell in order of obviousness, right? And so I'll only start with the first one, right? When the players are with an NPC or in a new room or space. And then, those other ones can be discovered based on what the players want to do and look at and feel and hear.
Yeah, I do something similar. It's usually, bullets and sub-bullets, right? Top level, medium, and then nested within that, the really detailed stuff, which I often don't get to. It's there for my benefit, and if the players want to dig deep, but
I think I'll also put that vibe word, that what is the feeling I feel when I've imagined this place, and then use that as sort of my North Star to make sure that any descriptors I add reinforce the vibe of this person, place, or thing.
Something that I have not done recently, but I have done in the past, is write a bunch of those feeling words at the top of my notes to like anchor me, right? If I am running a horror module, the things that are there to sort of remind me, or if I'm running a pulp adventure one, what feeling I'm trying to evoke. This might or might not be helpful to you, but the way that our brains make connections, I do think that this helps me sort of extemporaneously come up with descriptions of things that I maybe haven't prepared. This is a part of our ongoing advice of, not prepping too much, prepping situations, ideas, and things. But I think that this is helpful, prompting your brain to know what to situate yourself so that when you have to come up with something on the fly, which you will have to do all the time, you're not having to just pull that out of your brain bank from scratch.
Yeah. It's just so much easier even if all you have is a vibe and one noun for a new place, to do it this way, like in your prep. If I had to write a full description for every place that my players might go to, I would never finish prepping any module.
Yes.
And my goal, and so even if I'm running a published module or something that gives me box text, I'll take that box text and change it back into my preferred bullet point format, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that I can I'll pause, I'll imagine, right? Let myself see here, and then pause again and translate that into a lively and extemporaneous conversation with my players.
This is good. We've talked before about how to run published adventures, but and I don't know that we did this specifically. We should have. One of the things that I do, especially I think right before I'm about to run a section, is I read and review that, and if I haven't already, rewrite those bits to be shorter and more direct, because I don't know. I want to say 10 times out of 10, the box text is not something that I want to use or read, even the good stuff. So if you're somebody who does run published adventures and you are struggling with this, I would definitely emphasize rewriting those bits, or just cutting them, or learning how to cut them into shorter chunks that you can read, because it's doable, and it will save you time and heartache.
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't believe us, think about most podcasts. Most podcasts are conversational.
Yes.
It's because conversations are interesting, even if you're not the one in the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's the case for most role-playing games where you have 4 players and 1 DM, right? If you're listening to 2 other people talk, that's a very natural thing for people to do.
Yeah.
So you want to get to that conversation just as quickly as possible, or, take the route of all description is conversation.
Right.
You tell me what this is. What about this, this detective tells you he's fastidious?
Yeah, I think if we're gonna wrap up, the biggest, I think, the takeaway I would say is you want to get as quickly as possible from necessary information to what do you do next, what do you want to know more about, what do you say, right? As quickly as you can get from here's what's happening and what you feel and see to your turn to engage, the better.
I think it's also useful after you've prepped the session for the night to look back over all your places and descriptions and see are my descriptions all the same? Maybe that's okay. This whole area is menacing, but variety in description is good.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like to check over variety, as Rob was talking about before, variety in senses. Are all my descriptions visual? Now, okay, well, I should throw in a sound, a smell, the weird shifting of the ground here. Okay.
I said at the beginning, this isn't writing advice, and I stand by that. But if you are somebody who likes writing, a good writer, or wants to be a better writer, and this is something that you're interested in, my very brief advice for writing better descriptions is to read poetry. Poetry is really good about all your senses, but also describing things in brief ways, in interesting ways, in sort of unusual ways. You will learn a lot more from reading good poetry about how to write good descriptions than you will from reading even very good prose. So if this is advanced DM advice, but if you are interested in writing better descriptions, that is where I would start.
There once was a young man from Nantucket.
Hey, that's also a rich text, Matt. That conveys a lot of information. All right, listeners.
Yes. If you have any ideas, tips, or ways you like to make your descriptions better, please, talk to us about it on our Discord, link in the show notes, or send us an email at dmofnone@gmail.com.
And if you want to hear more advice, more episodes, more of everything, you can go over to our Patreon at patreon.com/dungeonmasterofnone. Sign up for $5 a month, and there's a lot more where this came from.
And if you like the show, we would always appreciate a quick review on your favorite podcast app of choice, or, a little 5 stars.
We love a 5-star. Thanks for listening, everybody. And whatever you do, keep rolling them dice.